Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, a very special crossover episode with Locked On Lakers, previewing Wolves Lakers tonight. Also off the top, I'm going to give you my season win total projection for the Wolves and also touch on the final roster heading into the regular season opener tonight. It's all coming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by our friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and happy opening night. The Wolves and Lakers happen tonight, the nightcap of the opening night doubleheader, ring night for the Celtics first. Wolves play at 9 p.m. on TNT, and of course at the Lakers. So the meat of today's show is going to be a lengthy conversation I had with the Locked On Lakers crew, and we get into the matchup specifically. We talk bigger picture West stuff. It's a great conversation. I want to open with some roster stuff. A couple things here off the top because. It's tonight. It's happening tonight. We kind of ran out of time with full season predictions. I'm going to do a couple here later in the week, but I want to do a win total prediction here to start us off on the right foot heading into the season. A big thank you off the top, though, for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can, of course, follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at B Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. All right. So the Timberwolves finalized their roster on Monday by waiving Keita Bates-Diop. It was reported over the weekend that he was not at practice on Saturday. The Wolves were talking about trying to trade him, of course, not wanting to pay the tax for waiving somebody with a fully guaranteed salary. I had talked about, look, PJ Dozier's is partially guaranteed. You won't pay quite as much in tax if you waive him. But I guess that part of the thinking here is, if we waive Dozier later, we're still it's the same thing, right? If we waive him now and then later we say we need a roster spot to complete a 2-for-1 trade or because there's somebody else available now, if somebody else comes available at some point that the Wolves want to sign, waiving Dozier hurts you less. And either way, you would have had to clear 2 spots in that scenario. So all that to say, Bates-Diop is gone. It is notable, and this was pointed out by Keith Smith, who's of course a good follow on X for anything cap related. He works over at Spot Track, which is, of course, the best salary data website. He says that the Wolves will have to pay $14.8 million in salary plus tax penalties for waiving Bates-Diop. Now, that doesn't need to be paid till the end of the season. So I believe if he gets picked up by another team, certainly if he gets claimed on waivers, they don't have to pay that salary. But it's $2.6 million in dead money on the cap because it is fully guaranteed. But the actual cap paid by Wolves ownership is going to be nearly $15 million, or actual dollar amount paid is near $15 million. So this was, they had to take him back as part of the trade, the Karl-Anthony Towns trade for Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, to make things work on the Knicks side. The Wolves needed to take back KBD, and he's still a rotation-worthy NBA player. The Wolves have a roster crunch. Clearly, they thought Dozier fit more with what they needed, and then they have some flexibility later with the partially guaranteed deal. So that shook out maybe a bit differently than I would have expected. But now we have some closure there. The final roster is set for the Wolves. The last thing I want to hit here off the top is my season prediction. I'm just going to give you a win total today. We got to get down to it. We got game 1 tonight. Maybe here late in the week, maybe on Thursday's show or something. Wednesday will be the post-game pod. Maybe on Thursday, I'll do a couple more predictions as we head into Wolves Kings Thursday night. So, set those aside. We'll get back to them. But I want to give you a win total prediction. So I have the receipt, frankly, here at the end of the season, if I'm right. And if I'm wrong, we just won't talk. I'm just kidding. I talked about last year's. I think I had them at 49 wins last year, which was higher than a lot of people. They won 56. This year, I have them as a 54-win team. I think the Timberwolves win 54 games in the regular season. I know they won 56 last year. I think the ceiling of the roster is a little bit lower. It's certainly possible they win 56 or more again, but they had fairly good injury luck last year. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm calling it like I see it. I know Cat missed a month. That was really their only significant injury. Jaden missed, 10 games, mostly with hamstring stuff, a couple nicks and bruises here and there. But I think grand scheme, maybe Rudy and Conley miss a few more games. the potentially clunky fit at the start of the season with Randle and Ant and everybody, I just think there's a chance for a little bit of a slow start. There's a chance for maybe some worse injury luck throughout the course of the season, but Ant's going to continue to improve. And the more I've thought about the Randle fit, the more I think it is workable. It just may be a little clunky at first. So my prediction is 54 wins for the Wolves this season. I think it's hard to say what seed that gets them in the West. It's probably still a top 3 seed, given how compressed the West is going to be. I know 57 wins were the top 2 seeds. The Wolves were the 3 seed at 56 wins last year. So like, I don't know. I don't know what seed that's going to be. I'm guessing it's like the 3 seed. That's my guess. We will see. I'll do some other prediction stuff here later in the week. Maybe I'll do a full West prediction. I didn't do too bad last year with my West prediction. So we'll do all that on Thursday show. I want to get into the Locked On Lakers conversation though. So we're going to go ahead and do that next. I caught up with Kamenetsky over at Locked On Lakers. Andy and Brian do a great job. The Kamenetsky brothers hosting Locked On Lakers. So we're going to go ahead and get into that here next. We preview the matchup a little bit. We talk about big picture Western Conference stuff. I ask Andy some questions toward the end of the conversation about what's the best case for the Lakers this year. They didn't do much to their roster. How are they going to improve? I asked some Redick questions. Of course, that's the biggest change in LA is the new head coach, JJ Redick, the very, very, very rookie head coach in JJ Redick. And we talk a little D-Lo, some other stuff toward the end of the conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get you over to myself and Andy Kamenetsky of Locked On Lakers coming up right now.
I'm Andy Kamenetsky, co-host of Locked On Lakers, joined by Ben Beecken from Locked On Wolves. And Ben, this is a really big game tonight, kicking off what I think everyone seems to agree is going to be a brutally hard season for any team battling in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I mean, like it's any team basically. I don't know, everybody except what, like Portland is gonna feel like they've got a shot.
No, Utah's gonna come around.
Yeah. That's true. But yeah, I mean, like it just magnifies. It just magnifies every game. The West is going to be so brutal. I mean, like we can get into this maybe a little bit, but like just how compressed the win totals are going to be, and it feels like every game is ultimately going to matter for tiebreakers or whatever purpose when the season comes down to it.
It's funny. Like last season, the Lakers won 47 games. I think with some better decisions, could have been a 50-win team, and you win 50 games, as you understand, there's a lot of optimism heading into your season. Like there's something psychologically different about a 5 in front of your win total as opposed to a 4. But the Lakers have these questions that center around a truly brand new coach in JJ Redick. And the Wolves have a truly new and different team, which is where we're going to begin. The Karl-Anthony Towns trade, sending them the Knicks, took a lot of people by surprise. Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo are now part of the Wolves. We're going to talk about what the new guys bring to the table in a bit, but just when you think about Cat's absence, like I know he's had ups and downs with Minnesota, but like looking through the all-time records for this franchise, Kevin Garnett is basically number 1 for everything, but Cat is number 2 in a lot, and KG is obviously the GOAT Wolf, but Karl-Anthony Towns might be the GOAT runner-up. He's a big presence in franchise lore. From both a cultural and on-court perspective, what do you think it means for him to no longer be with this team?
That's a great way to phrase that, because I think like my immediate reaction from a basketball standpoint is the ceiling of this team is lower, and I've certainly analyzed this in a number of different ways over the last 2 weeks, and there's a world in which they win more games this year, absolutely, but I just think the most likely best case or the ceiling of this team is a little bit lower without Karl-Anthony Towns, and that doesn't include some of the off-court stuff. And by all accounts, they handled this the right way, and you know, Cat is a great dude. And apparently Tim Conley went and talked to Cat in person about 5 minutes before the news broke, like went and saw him at his place and like had the conversation. And Cat was, you know, did great stuff in the community, even up until the day after he was traded. And like that cultural piece is interesting because clearly over the last couple of years, there was a shift in who's the alpha on the court. And it became Anthony Edwards, and Cat did all the right things. He not only said all the right things, he did do all the right things on and off the court. There was never any sort of angst between Ant and Cat. And now that guy's gone, and you're bringing in somebody in Julius Randle who, like, he's not like known for having off the court issues or anything like that, but it's a bit of a different mentality than what Karl-Anthony Towns has. And so there could be that shift. And I think there's the danger. I would put it almost on equal footing as what happens on the court with the actual X's and O's piece of this. How does and I think it's related, honestly, that the Randle and Ant dynamic work on the court specifically, because from a basketball standpoint, there's going to be less space. That's the obvious one, right? Like Randle and Ant both like to operate kind of in the middle of the floor. And what's that going to look like? Randle's nowhere near the shooter that Cat is. But then that spill over into the off the court, the overall mentality of the team. If the two who are supposed to be the two best players, or at least the two top offensive options, if those guys don't see eye to eye and there is a learning curve there, it's very rare that a team that went to the conference finals, that was one of the last really 3 teams playing in the NBA last year, trades their second best player on the eve of training camp. You could say the same thing about the Knicks, a team that's a finals hopeful with the Knicks also trading their second best player on the eve of training camp. So I think both are legitimate concerns, I think is probably the right word. But I don't know that, like, functionally, like, the team shouldn't be significantly worse. I don't think they're significantly better. It's just, can they work through some of these things? Is the culture that Tim Connolly and Chris Finch has instilled, is that strong enough to kind of get past any potential issues here? And that obviously remains to be seen. They only played one preseason game with Randle. He's still recovering from the shoulder surgery. So there's a lot that still has to be, kind of hashed out here in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and Randle has a potential player option that he can opt out of. So this could be thought of for him as a contract year. So he's got career concerns. He's got some of his own agenda, for lack of a better way of putting it, which doesn't necessarily mean he'll separate himself from the team. If, for what it's worth, when I covered Randle when he was with the Lakers, I really liked him a lot. And, he's an extremely hard worker. He plays very hard, and, there could be elements of physicality that he brings to this team that at the very least, I don't think you get with Karl-Anthony Towns. And it's funny with Randle, he and Cat are in a lot of ways, they're both very talented, but they are like polar opposite players, both in what they do. But, some of Randle's strengths, for example, like I feel like he could potentially find ways to create easier shots for Anthony Edwards better than Cat could. He's much more of an off the dribble threat. He's much more of like a drive and kick guy. Randle does often look for his own shot, and the ball can stop with him, but he might be able to do some stuff setting up Ant better. But with that in mind, how much utility do you feel like Ant has off the ball? Because Randle's, I think, is limited.
Yeah, Ant's actually a really good catch and shoot 3-point shooter. And I think even Chris Finch said something during training camp to the media about how, like, that's an opportunity for them that they've kind of highlighted, that, like, hey, Ant catch and shoot opportunities need to go up. Like, he was 44% catch and shoot threes last year, like, really good. He just didn't have that many opportunities because Cat's not the best passer off the dribble, and nobody else was really creating offense for this team. Like, Mike Conley's not driving and dishing at age 37. And so it was Ant creating for himself or potentially in transition. And that's an area, you're right. I think if Julius Randle is creating off the dribble, Randle's a superior passer to Cat in almost every way. And so there is potential there. I think I just wonder how much of the offense, when they're both on the floor together, will actually run through Randle. And that, to me, is the biggest offensive question mark, is, do they do that because Ant's more valuable off the ball than Randle? Or do they tell Julius Randle, hey, go stand in the corner while Ant's operating, and then maybe if Rudy's off the floor, if Naz Reid's in the front court with Randle, maybe they play Randle in the dunker spot a little bit, and he's done that a little bit in his career, and you put Naz on the perimeter, you play 4 out. So there's a lot of different options here, but you're right, Ant off the ball provides more value. It's just, how much are you willing to live with the multiple jab steps and the ball stopping with Randle and Chris Finch? It hates mid-range jumpers as much as any analytically minded head coach does. And so how's that going to play? Now, Randle's obviously not the same. Like, there's a good way and a bad way to get those shots off, and Randle's pretty effective when he gets into the paint, especially. But if the ball stopping becomes an issue, what's the answer there? I actually think the way he'll be most effective will be as basically one of Randle or Ant will always be on the floor. I think staggering their minutes, obviously they're both going to start, but staggering their minutes so that if Ant's off the floor, you tell Julius Randle, hey, it's your show. Like, you go score, go be a 1A guy right now. And then when they're on the floor together, that's when you got to kind of, what's the right flow of the offense?
You mentioned that Julius Randle's played one game with the Wolves in the preseason coming up. I want to get your impressions of what that looked like. We can get into some of the matchups that we think could be interesting on this opening night. And you can pepper me, Ben, with whatever you want about the Lakers. That's all coming up next. Locked on Lakers and Locked on Wolves brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can enjoy this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So let's just say you're watching a game and it feels like you can anticipate every single play before it happens. Every big touchdown pass, every big turnover, every big sack, busted run, whatever. It feels like you've got a second sense for everything. You can confirm those hunches with the latest stats, live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you would place your bets with FanDuel. And you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And NBA season kicks off today. Our friends at FanDuel, options for you as of this recording. The Thunder are 3-1 favorites to win the Western Conference, going through some of the other contenders, perhaps. The Wolves, Mavs, and Nuggets all tied at 5-1. The Grizzlies 16-1, Lakers 19-1, Warriors 21-1, and Pelicans and Kings tied at 22-1. That's FanDuel.com. All right, so as we mentioned before, there is one game in the books for the Wolves in the preseason. Reminder, this episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. How did it look for the Wolves with Randle on the court? And was it a game that Ant was out there with him as well?
Yeah, they played quite a bit together, and it was almost exactly what I expected, which was, and maybe a little bit better overall. Initially, it was clunky. Like, there was even a possession where Ant threw the ball to Julius at like the top of the circle, and Randle was thinking, I'm going to throw it back to Ant and get out of the way and let him cook. And Ant cut after he passed it, thinking, I'm going to let Randle, go to work, and the ball flew out of bounds. And there was kind of this like, okay, this is weird because they both were trying to be unselfish here. And then it ended up being like exactly what you'd expect, which was Randle got to showcase his passing a little bit. Ant had a couple of dump offs with Randle in the dunker. I think one in the dunker and one as a cutter, where Ant dumped the ball off to Randle for a layup or a dunk. We got to see a little bit of Randle in transition, which is another area that I think he could be really effective, where Cat was kind of spotty in transition. And the Wolves didn't run enough last year. They were dead last in running off of defensive rebounds. And Randle's a rip the rebound and go type of a guy. Yeah. So we saw a little bit of that. I think that's going to be super helpful. Chris Finch is excited about that. It actually ended up exactly what you'd kind of want it to be. And I think they each played 25, 28 minutes and the majority of that together. So yeah, I mean, I think it was better than I expected it to be. Like, it seemed like they got to this point where it was like, they were really playing off of each other. And I don't know what that looks like when there's a little bit more structure and you're dealing more with scouting reports and matchups in the regular season. And what you want to avoid, obviously, is the my turn, your turn stuff, which we saw a lot of early with Cat and Ant, where it was literally like one guy would use 4 possessions in a row and the other guy would just stand and watch. And they got away from that mostly last year. But I do think that because they're both good passers and because they can both score in traffic and get to the free throw line, as long as they're not operating in the same space, and of course, Rudy Gobert complicates that a little bit, it can work pretty well. And I think you mentioned already, the catch and shoot threat will be huge too, because Randle's such a good passer that as long as he knows, like, hey, everybody except Rudy Gobert on this team can knock down threes. The Wolves are actually number 1 in the league last year in 3-point percentage as a team. Like, Mike Conley's like 43%. Like, Randle's going to have more options and Dante DiVincenzo, who Randle played with. Like, there's plenty of options for catch and shoot if Randle's, penetrating and kicking. So I was encouraged by the way that the first, the only preseason game we got to see the two of them together, with the way that went. I was definitely encouraged. Yeah, you mentioned that Dante piece, and he's overlooked, I think, in certain ways, because Cat and Julius are both more accomplished players and bigger name players, but Dante DiVincenzo arguably had his career best year last year with the Knicks, was hitting threes at a very high clip, at very high volume. I think he gives a little bit more of that playmaking that the Wolves may have needed last season. But like, at the end of the day, the team's going to go as far as Ant, I think, can ascend as opposed to necessarily carry them. But, last year, second team All NBA, part of the Team USA run. How ready do you think he is in terms of just putting a team on his back and
dictating whatever is left to create of culture, because I would assume at least Cat was a big part of that, just from having that seniority and that tenure, and the guy who'd been there the longest. He's no longer there. I would guess Ant is now the longest tenured Wolf, or close.
Yeah. Yep.
How ready do you think he is to truly have this be his team, like on the court, in the locker room, all that?
Yeah. I think Naz Reid is maybe a year before. I think 1 year. It's close though. Ant and McDaniels were the same draft, so those two, and then I think Naz would be 1 year prior. I think he's about there. I think it's a good thing they still have Mike Conley. It's a really good thing they extended him last year. He's got 2 more years on his deal. We'll see if he was looking pretty worn down at the end of the year last year, but I think he's a great influence on Ant. And I think Gobert, honestly, too. And I know that there's
plenty of opinions out there about Gobert in the locker room by current and former players, but I think that it's spent more time talking about that on the show this offseason than I anticipated, actually. But yeah, I think he's out there. And I mean, through a round and a half last year, through 2 rounds last year in the playoffs, I mean, everybody would have said, like, all right, he's there. I mean, like, we ran the gamut of he's Michael Jordan, so, like, hold up, is he even that good? Like, that happened very quickly. He ran out of gas in the conference finals, and I don't think it was like it got to the point where there were those questions because he was passing up opportunity. He looked like he didn't want the moment, but I think he was just completely dead tired. We saw in the summer, you mentioned the Olympics, like he wanted the moment there. He was more of a bench heat check type guy for Team USA, but like he doesn't want to shy away from the moment. He does want to carry the team. I just think he didn't have a full understanding, and he wasn't the only one, of like what this takes to get to the finals and win the finals, and just literally ran out of gas. Tough matchup against the Mavs, and Luka played out of his mind. I think he's about there, though. It's incredible to say about a guy who's 23. But like with some of those veteran guardrails, and you lose one of them in Cat, and Cat is Cat, but he was still a steam presence because he'd been there so long, and him and Ant were friends. But like with Rudy and Conley kind of helping along, and then you add in DiVincenzo, I would say, and Randle, and like you lose Kyle Anderson, but there's still enough. Joe Ingles is now in the fold, so you've still got that like mix of a couple really old guys, Conley and Ingles, and Rudy's kind of in the middle, and then a couple really young guys. I think Ant's about there, and I think Chris Finch is the perfect coach for him because he's laid back and the players love him, but he also will call it like it is, and he's not afraid to call out a player, whether it's even in the media if somebody needs to be better. I mean, he had some pretty pointed comments about Rob Dillingham's preseason the other day and said, look, he's got to be better in these areas. I think it's the perfect type of coach for Ant too, and I think I feel good about him as a leader. I just think it's in his own way. But that's not a concern, I think, headed into this year. I think he's about ready to get this team at least back to the conference finals and hopefully make another step.
Yeah, and thinking about the matchups for tonight, one of the big ones that is really intriguing to me, and it might feel self-evident, kind of, well, duh, but who guard Ant for the Lakers? Because with Jared Vanderbilt hurt, that's your first choice in a perfect world off the table. And, Ant is too big and strong for Austin Reeves. He's too big and fast for Rui Hachimura. And it's not ideal to have LeBron be the primary guy on a scorer like Ant, like crunch time, sure, but as the main defender, it's not what you'd want for LeBron entering. You might have heard, Ben, he's turning 40 this year. I don't know if it reached your neck of the woods, but it's been talked about a lot here. They may have no choice for it. I think Rui is much better cover for Randle. And maybe this is in part why LeBron was given the last 2 preseason games off. Like, they may anticipate the idea that right out of the gate, LeBron's going to have this assignment covering Ant. And they just want to make sure, like, you get weeks worth of rest and your legs back under you before you take that on. What's a matchup that you find pretty intriguing about tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about on the flip side, the Anthony Davis piece, because Cat was the easy answer for the most part for guarding Anthony Davis. I mean, it is interesting when you look at this, and teams are so willing to cross match nowadays that like it is kind of a puzzle. Like, and for a team with Rudy Gobert, I mean, a lot of times teams will do exactly what you suggested, which is basically leave a smaller guy on him and try and just deny a lob as much as you can and live with whatever happens. I mean, he's actually improved as a free throw shooter enough last year that like Rudy wasn't really a thing. And so there's some danger there, certainly, because I mean, like the Wolves are happy to toss him the ball if he's wide open. But I mean, that that's interesting. Who guards Ant? I think LeBron guarding Ant would be fascinating. I would think Hachimura would have a shot. I can't remember who typically guarded him last year. I think at times it was Taurean Prince, at times Vanderbilt when he was healthy. That would be interesting. The most interesting thing is who's going to guard Ant. And then the flip side, in my mind, who's guarding Anthony Davis? Is it Julius Randle? I don't know what kind of history they have, guarding each other at all or not, but I guess turning it around from the Lakers side, who is there a matchup that you'd be concerned about for or somebody you'd want to guard Anthony Davis or a plan you think that the Lakers might have coming into the game offensively against, the Wolves are an incredible defensive team last year, and Jaden McDaniels is their best perimeter defender, but I don't think the plan is to put Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Davis, at least not if you don't want him to get in foul trouble right away.
This is what makes the Lakers, at least offensively, a potential problem for a lot of teams around the league. There's you don't need to worry about him guy in the Lakers' first five. All five of them are dynamic scoring options. And there's nobody that you can ignore. And given how, Anthony Davis has been putting up more threes in this preseason than he ever has, but I still consider him more of, a threat around the rim than behind the arc. But the other four guys are all guys that operate in space. So there's nobody for Rudy to ignore in that way if that was the type of thing that you were looking to do. So my expectation would be that Rudy Gobert guard AD, and that Julius Randle, Jalen McDaniels, those are the guys going checking LeBron and Rui. And I'm anticipating very little cross matching, at least from Minnesota's defensive perspective, but we shall see. And speaking of we shall see, Ben, what questions you have about the Lakers. That's coming up next. Locked On Lakers and Locked On Wolves are brought to you by BetterHelp. October's the month where we celebrate wearing masks and costumes, but some of us feel like we are wearing a mask more often than we want to. Work, social settings, around our family. Therapy can help you find different ways to accept all parts of yourself. So you can take off the mask, because masks are for Halloween fun, not for our emotions. Spooky season should not feel like a year-round event. And I can personally attest to how much therapy helped me and my family during a really difficult period, learning the best ways to communicate, make compromises without feeling unsatisfied or unheard. Just learn to think beyond your own perspective and to become the best version of yourself, and not just for yourself, but for the people in life. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapist anytime for no additional charge. Take off the mask with BetterHelp. That's BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. So what do you want to know, Ben, when it comes to this Lakers squad, the J.J. Redick era of the Lakers, the Bronny era of the Lakers? What do you want to know?
So I guess think a little bit bigger picture, kind of zooming out a little bit. Looking at the Western Conference this offseason, obviously, some teams got a lot better. A couple of teams got much worse. Look at the Clippers and stuff. But there are other teams that didn't really change much, and the Lakers are the one that probably stayed the most similar in terms of the roster. Obviously, the coaching change we can talk about too. But from a Lakers perspective, what's the hope for this team improving this year? Why would this team be better? And you said they made some bad decisions last year. Maybe coaching is the answer, that they're going from 47 to 50 plus wins. But what's the best case scenario in terms of this team progressing from last season to this season, and what does that look like?
Well, a big piece of it, honestly, would be J.J. Redick. If you believe in his potential as coach and his ability to, outpace his lack of experience, because he truly has never done this before at any level, or just you thought some of Darvin Ham's decisions last year were so inexplicable, and there were some that frankly were, and Darvin ultimately lost the locker room over them. It's not even that players didn't like some of what he was doing. They flat out didn't understand it. And I think that's really the point where, as a coach, you're done when the players don't get what you're doing. you can look back last year at a handful of wins or a handful of situations where it felt like better, more understandable coaching could have gotten the Lakers a handful more wins. And then all of a sudden, again, you're talking about a 50-win team. You're talking about a team that doesn't end up facing Denver in the first round. Maybe they go a round or two in the playoffs, and you feel differently about them. Like there's more optimism heading into the offseason and into this season. So I guess whether you think JJ Redick is that good of a coach out of the gate or just that able to avoid some of the things Darvin didn't, that could lead to the Lakers being a better team this year. There's obviously the hope that and necessity that LeBron and Anthony Davis stay healthy and the pieces around them. Dalton Connect as a rookie off the bench could potentially provide them some bench scoring that last year was just absent from the team once Rui Hachimura got put into the starting lineup, which was the correct idea. Like the Lakers became a much better team once he entered that unit, but the price that was paid was the bench scoring was pretty non-existent. And Dalton Connect, there's going to be some growing pains like there are with any rookie, and he will get targeted defensively, but the guy can score. He put up 35 in a preseason game, and some of the shots that he made were really difficult. Like he can score at the NBA level. And I think that's going to be a potential factor. And also, and this is the I don't know if it's going to happen factor, but something that I know the Lakers, for better or for worse, are counting on is that Austin Reeves is going to take another step in his development, because this team was very much designed with the idea of Austin Reeves becoming a legitimate third best player on a championship caliber team, a type of team that can go multiple rounds in the playoffs. I think Austin is a good player. I don't think he's at that level yet. And the problem for this team is, they've, I think, held off on potential opportunities and trades that maybe could have made them better because they wanted to keep Reeves. But also, two, if it's not him, I don't know who it's going to be. Like D'Angelo Russell, I think is a good player. He's very polarizing. I'm sure there are a lot of Wolves fans watching this right now with very strong, likely negative opinions about D'Lo, but I think on balance last year he had a better regular season than Reeves. Reeves was better than him in the playoffs. But no matter who you think is the better of the two, the problem is neither one of them, I think, is as good as this team needs them to be. And again, the Lakers are really investing in the idea that it's Reeves. They're starting to give him more on-ball opportunities, more of a direct usage in the offense. I'm not sure it actually plays to his strengths. We'll see how it goes. But that is, if the Lakers do outperform last year, one facet I think the Lakers as a front office are hoping for or counting on is that Reeves will take that next step.
Yeah, and sitting here from the outside looking in, like that feels like a pretty fair assessment of, there's obviously a clear top two players, and at this stage it still feels like Davis and LeBron are both good enough to be the top two players on a championship caliber team, but then there seems to be a drop off before that number three player, and Reeves at this point has more upside than somebody like a D'Lo, and maybe Connect can get there someday. But the question is who can step up and be that third guy, I guess. So like bridging the gap between the Redick piece of what you just talked about and this matchup against the Wolves, Minnesota was the best defense in the league last year. It wasn't close. They were, I think, the second best or the second biggest gap between the number one defense and the number two defense in the last 30 years. It was like a Spurs team 8 years ago or something that had a bigger gap, and that was it. Wow. What does the Lakers, for I guess bigger picture wise, what kind of influence do you think Redick will have offensively for the Lakers, and how will the Lakers offense change? And then what does that mean for how they would attack the Wolves, which, Minnesota's got two. Jaden McDaniels is a second team all defensive player on the perimeter. Rudy Gobert is reigning defensive player of the year. Ant is a plus perimeter defender. What's the plan look like for how the Lakers would go about attacking the Wolves, and perhaps what influence would Redick have on that, both in this game and then, bigger picture, which maybe is tough to answer before seeing him pitch in a regular season game. But I guess what's the anticipation there for the Lakers offense?
Ben, I need to quickly correct you. You said that Rudy Gobert is the reigning defensive player of the year. You needed to say the reigning defensive player of the year at Anthony Davis's expense. That's
He finished third in voting? Third, right? Or second?
No, he finished, I believe, fourth.
Oh, was he really?
He was not one of the top three.
Wow.
He did make all defense first team.
Okay.
And he certainly outplayed Rudy Gobert in the Olympics, but that we won't get sidetracked.
I would have heard an argument about Anthony Davis for defensive player of the year. I think that's more than some of the other candidates.
I think Anthony Davis has a legitimate gripe when he says he doesn't feel like he gets enough respect around the league for what he does defensively. As far as what the Lakers would look to attack that Wolves D, that I didn't know that stat. Like, I knew last year their defense was good. I didn't realize it was that good. They're definitely looking to add, first of all, more three-point shooting. Like last year, the Lakers were kind of quietly a top 10 team in terms of three-point percentage in the league. They actually were hitting at a very good clip, but they were 28th, I believe, or 27th in attempts, which makes no sense. And I think it left a lot of points on the table, even with a really good offense. And that's something Redick is looking to increase a lot. So far in the preseason, results have been pretty spotty, but I think some of that is them just unlearning their previous habits of not taking these threes and, I think seeking them out a little bit more than they would once they're used to things and they get a little bit more judicious with it. The other thing that Redick is looking to implement is just more motion in general. He is, you're still going to see pick and roll. It's LeBron, it's Anthony Davis. You don't get away from those things altogether. But at the same time, JJ Redick has really emphasized the idea of we don't want guys standing around. Like, we want to keep guys in continual motion. There's been a lot more flow and a lot more creativity to the offense, even at times when it hasn't always looked that efficient or even pretty. Like, there have been times where it's felt to me like guys are rushing to their spot, rushing to get certain shots. Like, you can tell they're still working through stuff, and especially in the preseason when LeBron has missed a few games, like his control over the offense is always going to be a thing that can't be replicated and can't be faked. So it's going to look different. But were I to guess, the way I'd answer your question, Ben, is I think he wants to make it so there's more for the Wolves to keep track of defensively, like more off-ball movement, like more heads on a swivel, like you can't just key in defensively and just sort of watch one or two players and you have a general idea of what's happening. Just make sure you don't sag off too much defensively and leave a guy open in the corner for a kick out. Like that there's going to be actual movement required defensively because there's all this movement that's going on offensively, and that you might be able to confuse even a team like Minnesota just by giving them more to keep track of. That would be the guess.
And that's the Wolves' biggest blind spot, I guess, would be off ball. Some of that stuff, it can get a little lazy off ball, and Julius Randle's had those issues. And so some of that getting lost in the wash, if teams actually do, it's a lot harder to guard versus just playing straight isolation, against basically anybody. Luka Doncic is like the only guy that they couldn't guard in space last year. Otherwise, they're pretty well set up with perimeter defenders and Rudy Gobert at the rim. So last question, going back to way big picture question, but for Wolves fans especially, what do you think is what's your big picture prediction for the Lakers this year? Do you think realistically it's a get out of the play-in type year for the Lakers, or is it going to be a similar outcome or as it was last year, or what do you think about the overall season result for LA?
I think if guys stay healthy this year and they are able to, in a lot of ways, this is a LeBron question. In a perfect world, you would look to try to ease someone like LeBron and maybe even to a certain extent AD through a season just to try to have them as great as they can be in the playoffs. But I think the West is too difficult. You mentioned getting out of the play, and I think top 6 should be their baseline goal for the season. Just avoid that play-in altogether. Avoid the mad sprint that they had the last 2 years where they've, post All-Star break, they're one of the best teams in the league, but that's in part because they have no choice other than to be one of the best teams in the league if they want to make the playoffs or just make the play-in to have the opportunity to get to the playoffs. So I feel like top 6 seed should be the baseline minimum goal. They're not going to put their foot to the pedal and try to get a number 1 overall seed. I don't even know if they're capable of it, but I think that would be an unwise goal to begin with. But there is a certain amount of energy and intensity and urgency that this team that often hasn't exhibited, it's kind of a franchise thing too. It's always, the regular season doesn't matter. It's all about the playoffs. The reality is the regular season sets you up for the playoffs. And I think they're going to have to treat the season with more urgency. But I also feel like Jay Redick has really been emphasizing that it's been a more urgent preseason than I've seen in quite a while. So I'm hoping that is a precursor of things to come. Last question, who wins tonight?
Actually, I saw that on FanDuel. Actually, Wolves are only favored by 1.5, which surprised me a little bit. It wouldn't surprise me if the Lakers win. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or not, but I actually kind of think the Lakers might win this game, and then the Wolves, they have the Kings 2 nights later. Maybe they have a response against the Kings on Thursday.
I think the Lakers are going to be able to take a bit of advantage of the Wolves. Both teams are figuring things out, but I think the Wolves may be further behind the curve just because the trade happened more recently than Jay Redick taking over. Going Lakers, but I think it's going to be a really fun, competitive game. Looking forward to an entire season and talking with you more across the year. Ben, thank you very much for the time. This was fun.
And there you have it, a well-rounded conversation with Andy Kamenetsky of Locked On Lakers. I'll, of course, have the post-game pod for you after tonight's game. It'll be late. It'll be, I guess, early Wednesday morning will be the post-game pod, so check that out. And, stay tuned. The rest of the week, we'll get you ready on Thursday. I'll do some more predictions. We'll get you ready for Wolves-Kings Thursday night from Sacramento. And then Wolves play again on Saturday. So lots to get to later in the week. Hopefully the Wolves get off to a great 2-0 start on the West Coast. But stay tuned for that post-game pod. Of course, a reminder, we're daily Monday through Friday. Make sure you're following and subscribe to Locked On Wolves wherever you listen to podcasts. That's all we got for you here today on the show. A reminder about the Locked On team newsletters, by the way. Your favorite podcast, this one, Locked On Wolves, now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Wolves daily newsletter, one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. You'll get an email every day. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. Big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen. You can find it wherever you get podcasts. You can watch on YouTube, of course. You can also follow on X at Locked On T Wolves and also at B Beecken. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast. Enjoy opening night tonight, and we'll catch you next time.